All right. Hello. All right, we're good. Okay. So today's number of the day is 011616. This is app, the index of each letter in app. So A 01, 16 for P. So this is app. Does anybody need more time to fill out the attendance form? Okay. Yes. I think it is screen sharing right now, or it's the screen is shared. So the recording should just show me like to the side, I'm pretty sure. No, I just didn't do that last week. Yeah.
That's why we have a question that would you prefer no partner more than
Yeah, so we've had some people who preferred not working with partners, and it's been abundant enough that we'll just ask. So if you don't want to have a partner, the attendance form asks that now, because we assign partners immediately based off of the attendance form for next week. So, okay, everybody good on the attendance form? Okay. If not, just come at the end of the lecture and we'll give you the link. So today we're going to be talking about intent and manifest. So before we get into the actual content of the lecture, we have a couple of announcements. So homework 3 is going to be an extension of homework 2. I've mentioned this previously. So we're still going to be dealing with color spaces. Now we're going to be dealing with HSV and converting between HSV and RGB. And it's also going to be based off of a homework 2 solution, which we'll provide after lecture. So if you're worried about your homework 2 potentially having errors, we'll provide to you a solution code to build off. And so homework 3 is technically due Friday, but it's going to be also, you can turn it in on Wednesday, no penalty. But we don't want to have the official due date after fall break, because that'd be coming in. So it's going to be due Friday, but no penalty, no slip days used if you turn it in Wednesday, if you prefer. It's just a choice, I guess. Just to emphasize, so if you're wondering if you ever are like not assigned a partner for an assignment, it's probably because we don't have you as present for that lecture, because we use the attendance forms to assign partners. And just a reminder, you're only allowed 1 absence. And so if you're not in the system for 1 and you were here, let us know so we can put it in. So also now we're not going to require GitHub submissions anymore for future homeworks. The reason why we did it to begin with was to make sure that you know how to use GitHub, because we had issues during the hack challenge where people would be working with like a back-end person, and neither of them really know how to use GitHub, and it'd just be this whole thing where they'd be like sending zip files back and forth, and it's a very, very bad thing to do. So the idea is we go through it now so that we don't have to struggle later on when there's already enough struggle with making the app. And also, in case you guys didn't know, sometimes at the bottom of homeworks we have challenge problems. These are extra credit. For each problem you do, you get extra credit. So you have the potential to get over 100 on each homework, but they are kind of challenging, so do them at your discretion. For right now, all office hours, asterisk, except Asta's office hours, are now on Zoom. Asta has her office hours in Carpenter Hall, one of the rooms. You have to check the website to be for sure, but we might have other ones also in Carpenter soon, but for right now, all the other ones are on Zoom. Any questions about logistics? Okay. So let's review a little bit of the topics from last week. So activities is one of the topics that we talked about last week. And specifically, what is an activity? So at a high level, we said an activity was sort of like a screen. We can basically say our app is made of 3 screens, so maybe it's made also of 3 activities. So each screen corresponds to an activity roughly. And activities don't necessarily have to take up the entirety of the screen. They could be fragments, which we'll talk about later on. The screen could also just be made of XML elements, strictly front end, no logic. And so what does all of this mean? So this basically can be translated here. I think there's one more clip. Yeah, there's one more. Yeah, so here where we're seeing basically something is hosted within an activity, a fragment. And the whole idea here is we're trying to ease the idea of fragment, maybe start get some intuition towards what a fragment is, so it's not so difficult later on when we do study it in the future lectures. But it's this idea that the activity is could host something else. And so you can roughly think of it as a screen, although in this case, it's not the bulk of the information. The bulk of the information is being hosted within our fragment. So this is just one example. Any questions on this example? Okay. And yeah, this right here is actually just XML. It's not actually live, in case you were wondering. Was that your question? Yeah, it's hard coded. But it comes from real data, though. It's not arbitrary. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the Android lifecycle. So the Android lifecycle is basically how you think about the lifecycle of an app, because specifically with mobile development, this is a huge topic. When I'm making like a Python script, I just run it, and it does whatever the program tells me to do it. But with Android, even with iOS or any other mobile operating system, you have sort of the app running in the background, and background services constantly happening at all times. So we're going to find that this is a very important part of Android development. And we'll see we're actually already familiar with some of this. So of all of these, what have you guys seen? There should be particularly one thing that you guys have seen from here. Yeah. Oncreate, right. So Oncreate is the method that we've basically been putting most of our code in at this point, right? It's one of the methods that describe an Android lifecycle. Can someone take a guess as to what part of the lifecycle Oncreate describes? Now it's your question. Yeah. Yeah, when the app is like first created. Yeah, exactly. The activity is first created. Good. And so we have a whole bunch of other ones, right? We have onStart, onResume, and we have this life cycle here where it can be running, then pause, stop, or destroy. Okay, this is sort of just a good diagram to take a look at everything from a high level. And we've only seen onCreate. So we were just talking about onCreate, but this is called when the system first creates the activity, and this is done once per activity lifecycle. So I can't really create an activity twice without having destroyed it first. So that's why we're only going to be able to create it once per lifecycle. And we've already been using this method, and so every time we boot up our app, the code that we put in, we see the effects of it immediately, right? If I said put in like a seek bar, right? This isn't something that'll be delayed after we do some stuff. The moment our activity is launched, we see our seek bars are there. Does this make sense? Okay. So the rest of them we're going to move through a little quickly, just because I don't think we're going to be doing too much with very specific methods of the Android lifecycle, unless you're making like a very involved application. But onStart is basically called the moment that the activity becomes visible to the user. So this is sort of maybe in your mind conflicting a little bit with onCreate. You might be thinking this sort of sounds like onCreate, but in reality, there is an order in which this is run after it's created. So after it's created and everything is presented to the user, then onStart is being run. So in the example we just described, where I said there was a seek bar in our Oncreate, if I put my seek bar in Onstart, then it would be after it had been created, then create a seek bar. Does that make sense? So it's when you put it in the Oncreate, this is for when you're creating the activity itself. And once the activity is created, then we hit this. So the seek bar needs, and all of those initial parts of your application are going to want to be in the Oncreate, which is why we do that. Typically, you'll see some state management things, but that's a pretty sophisticated level of development that a lot of companies use for Android development. And we use for different transit. But I think that's it. Okay. So on resume is called when the app is officially running. So this doesn't have to be for the first time. This could be every time you're running it again. So I'm sure you guys have lots of familiarity with using phones. And so if I close an app and I go to the home screen, and I relaunch that application, then it was sort of running in the background, or maybe the process was killed entirely, depending on what application it is. And then when you open it, it's going to resume, right? It's going to, a lot of the times, pick up where it left off, assuming you didn't kill the app. So a lot of the times, if you're going to want something like you just taking it out of the background and you're going to do something, this is where you would put it. So coming to the foreground is the way that we describe it. Does that make sense? Okay. So these are a little bit self-explanatory from the title. So on pause is what happens when we pause, but not necessarily that we kill a process. So if let's say I was running Angry Birds, and I go to the home screen, and I was in the middle of like a really heated level, and I didn't want them to kill the app when I leave and I go to the home screen. If Angry Birds is a good app, they would probably implement on pause and sort of save the state of where I was. That way, when I return to it, it's going to pick up from where I was. So this is basically where you put everything the moment you've left. So it's like, I just left the app. All right, let's make sure we store everything about where he was in the level, so that when I come back, they can reload it on resume. Does that make sense? Okay. And this is on stop, which is like on pause, but when we entirely kill the process. And so this is a good place to commit changes to data. So if there is no resuming possible because I've actually killed it, then this is like you could lose data if you don't save it here. And on destroy is like really like force stop the app. This is like you killing the thread on your processor entirely. And so if manually dismissing the activity. This can also happen when you rotate the phone, because it's not necessary. So one way to kill an activity is to kill the app, but an app can be made of many activities too. So this is a great example of showing that you can kill an activity by simply doing something within the app, like rotating the phone. So you'll see the default behavior is that it'll just completely get destroyed when you rotate it and recreate the activity in the new orientation. Okay. So now we're going to talk about intents. Before we move on to intents, any questions about the sort of high level of the Android lifecycle? Okay. And there's even more than what we've covered. There's like a very specific stuff if you're going to do like something weird. Intents are basically ways that we send data across different activities. So, and it can also be used for communicating between app to app or activity to activity. And we'll see that we have two types, explicit intent and implicit intent. Okay, so first we're going to talk about explicit intents, which is between app components. So let's say I was, in the example we were looking at previously, right? We had the, actually, let's give a better example. Let's say I'm on a login screen, and then I also have like my main account that gets loaded after I successfully log in. When logging in and I type in my credentials, it's going to ping the backend and see what my account is. Based off of my username and password, it should be able to find, like, my name is Adam, blah, 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 whatever it says about my account. So once it retrieves this data, we shouldn't throw it away, right? We're going to go to a new activity, but we need to send this data to the new activity because the new activity does not automatically have this data. So to send it, we would put it in an intent, and we would put it on the sending side of the login activity and put it on the receiving side on the profile activity. So there's the sender, and then there's the receiver. The login activity is the sender, and the account is the receiver. Does that sort of make sense at a high level? So the typical syntax is going to be something like this, where we're creating an intent, and capital I for the class intent. And this is basically saying this, describing the context we're currently in, and then the target activity. So like if I was going to the account activity, then this is where I put the account activity. And then this is the key right here, intent.putExtra. This is basically where you store information. So in this example, they're storing the string OpenShields under the key eatery name. So it's a key value pair. On the receiving side, if I want to get OpenShields, I got to give them the key. I have to know that the key was eatery name to get that string OpenShields. Does that make sense? So it's sort of like you can only get the information on the receiving side if you have the key. And then to start it, we explicitly call on start activity of the intent that we created. And in the target activity, we'll retrieve it as getIntent.getExtras and then .getString. The key, eatery name, is our key. So then what would we have in eatery name, that val? What would we get? Yeah, the string of OpenShields would be received. Good. So this is because we're first getting the intent, then getting all of the extras from that intent, and then getting the string. So I didn't even need to say get the intent we just created. I just said get the intent, right? Get intent. Because we're starting this activity intent. You shouldn't be willy-nilly throwing data all across and not receiving. Use intents sparingly just because it's sort of sending it across. Does this make sense? Okay. So click a little more. Yeah. So in this case, the eatery name. So we were just looking at the case where the eatery name would have been OpenShield. But for this one cell of the eatery app, it's going to use this, receive the intent, and then ping the database to get information about how to populate this front. So this whole bare necessities screen has to be populated based off of whatever data is in the database. But we don't want to be constantly having all of the data at all times. So we're only going to grab it if it's useful at the moment. So in this case, someone clicked on bare necessities. So from this activity, we send an intent over to this activity. Now that we're on this activity, we're going to receive that string, ping the database, and populate the string. Does that make sense? Okay. So implicit intents is now the next thing that we're going to talk about. So what we've just seen is considered an explicit intent. An implicit intent is used to launch other applications and processes on a user's device. This is things like sharing. Like if I'm in let's say I'm in my contacts app and I want to share a phone number, I hit that share button, and then I'm going to have to create an implicit intent to actually bring it into another app. Like if I want to share that phone number on WhatsApp or something. So when I'm sharing from app to app, this is when we are going to be using implicit intent. So Google provides a long list of different types of intents that you can send. Here are some examples. So setting an alarm, turning off the device's screen, sharing information to another app, what we were just talking about, and creating a shortcut for the app. So you can create a shortcut for apps on a home screen, and this would also be considered an implicit intent. Setting an alarm is a very common one. You'll find Google does themselves. If I say like, "Hey Google," sorry if your phone goes off, like set an alarm, then what it's going to do is it's going to see whatever alarm clock I have and do an implicit intent to actually set the alarm in whatever my default alarm clock has. Does that make sense? Okay. So one example is sharing a message.
Play it.
Sure. Okay, maybe not.
Okay, an error has occurred. No video today, sorry.
All right, there's more examples. So also, is this gonna load? So what this is, I can just describe what it is. So in this one, what happens is, I have the phone number for something. You can sort of see it. So I have the phone number for some place, and I want to call them. So in this app, imagine it's like the Yelp app, right? The Yelp app has a thing with their phone number. When I click on it, it's going to create an implicit intent to whatever your phone app is, so you can actually call them. Because it'd be a little bit like, what's the alternative to this? The alternative would be to copy the phone number and then paste it in your thing, which is like one step harder. So the implicit intent makes it easier on the user. So it directly gets thrown into the dialer app that you have. Does that make sense? Okay. Sorry the videos didn't load. So for manifest, we've already seen a little bit, or talked a little bit about what a manifest is, but now we're going to actually be using it in Homework Group. So a manifest contains a lot of important information about the app. We talked about how you can sort of think about it like a blueprint for an application, that along with the build.gradle. And so every activity that you make has to have been declared in the manifest. So if I'm going to create two different activities, then I'm going to have to explicitly say that I have an activity of whatever it's called in my manifest. So I believe Android Studio automatically populates your manifest if you click New Activity rather than New Class. So if you found so far that this is something you've never done, it's probably Android Studio making your life easier. But just know that this is what's actually happening behind the scenes. If you're debugging something, it's like not launching an activity, this is a good thing to check. And yeah, but we're going to find that you also have like the application name, fragments, permissions, which is going to be new for this new homework, and software requirements. Okay, so the app launcher, so every application must specify the activity that acts as the entry point with action.main. So if I have 8 activities, what's the main activity? What's the one that I start towards? So like this is something that you need to specify about your application. So if I was creating an app like any social media, you could probably guess that the main activity that gets launched on the first time it's created is the login activity. But in future iterations, I'm sure they have some sort of system where they don't have to actually go to the login every time. Right after you log in, you're done. You've logged in, and then you go to your timeline. But you can sort of think about it as this is the home base when you first start. This is where you're always going to go. So does this make sense, this concept? Okay. So permissions is going to be something that you have to explicitly declare, and this is done for security reasons. You don't want to give an application access to your camera if it doesn't need it. And these things, when declared in the manifest, will then prompt the user. As of Android 5.0, every time someone wants a permission, they have to ask the user, and the user can choose to allow or deny it. And if they deny it, then some features might not work. Common permissions, location, internet usage is a permission. So if you want to use the internet, you have to declare this as a permission. User storage, camera. And so typically when you declare a permission, you have to do it like this. So take notice. Is this Kotlin or is this XML? Just quickly glancing at it. XML, right? So we're going to be using XML in the manifest. The manifest is going to be an XML file, in case you haven't already opened it before. And many other important files throughout the Android file system, which I'm sure you've started to get the hang of the fact that a lot of them are XML. So this is what it looks like. We have this sort of HTML-looking bracket, or XML-looking bracket, where we're saying uses permission, Android :name, and then the actual name of the permission is a string. And there's some autocomplete here, so you don't need to memorize it. Or worst case, you Google it. Google has very well-defined documentation for this, as they should. And so we have two types of permissions, normal and dangerous. So normal permissions are automatically granted, like internet use, for example. So if I every time I opened an Android app, if I had to say, yes, you can use the internet, that would be really annoying. Because like 99% of apps that I'm going to download from the Play Store are going to use the internet. But something like location, right? Maybe Google Maps and like Snapchat or something, like would ask for location. But other than that, it's like more of a niche thing, something that's, and also definitely something you want to be more well guarded about giving out. So this is something that would be considered a dangerous permission. And so we also need to make sure that you create the app in such a way so that it works if it's denied or it works if it's allowed. So if your app just completely crashes when someone denies the permission, then that's not good design. You'll find that some apps that are like totally centered around giving a permission even will have some fail-safe measures. Like I'm pretty sure in Google Maps, if you don't give it access to like location, it still says like, please give us location access. It's not just going to crash. So there's some fail-safety measures in case they deny it. So this is what good app development would do. And the other thing is you can do it only when the app is open. This is recent. Android is consistently iterating on their security technologies for permission. Okay, this is an example when the internet access, this is for TikTok. And so you have to, it's prompting, hey, grant us permissions because you haven't given us the permission to do this. Actually, I think this is for video recording, but the idea is TikTok was smart. TikTok recognized that there was some permission that was denied, and it didn't just freak out and crash. It sort of interacted with the user and said, hey, please grant us permissions, and explained why it's not able to do this thing. Okay, and that's going to be the end of lecture for today. Do we have any questions? Any questions on the manifest, permissions? Yeah. Yeah. So when I'm putting in a permission, I put that in my manifest, and same for the app one. Yeah. So this is following the idea that our manifest is kind of like a blueprint. So these important things that are like important for the entirety of the app, right? The structure is found there. Any other questions? All right. So then we'll move on to demo.
Okay, so yeah, so here we have our typical empty activity. So today, because we're going to be working with intents and stuff, I'm going to create a new activity just so we can see what it looks like for like navigating between activities. So I'm going to create, right-click, and go to activity, then a new empty activity. give it a very creative name of a second activity. And finish. All right, and it's gonna do some Gradle stuff. But while it's doing that, so first we're gonna work with explicit intents, which allow us to basically navigate between different activities in a single app. So what I'm first gonna do is go to resources and go to the main activity layout, and I am going to add just a button so that I can click on the button and switch between activities. Button. Gonna copy over some stuff. Copy over, wrap content, and gonna give it some text. Action, and gonna give it some constraints. Okay, and what you should do is not hard code in things, and you should instead use string resources, as Android Studio is letting me know. And because I can add string resources in values, and I'm going to just say like string name equals button text. Say do some action, and I can reference that in the layout as well. So just a quick refresher on using string resources. All right, so there's my button, and what I'm going to do right here is now when the button is clicked, I want to go to the second activity, right? So what I can do is first add an ID to this button. So I can grab it from the Kotlin file. And right. Plus ID to button. There we go. And one more thing I'm going to do just for demo purposes, I am going to add a text view to the second activity. And I am just going to copy over this text view. Okay, so now it's time to create an explicit intent. So first I want to grab the button. And so I can say, find this button using find view by ID. And it's going to ask me to import it, which I will. And then I can say, okay, I'm going to set an on-click listener so I can do something when it's actually clicked. So now when it's clicked, what do I want to do? Well, first I want to create a new intent. And I want to say it's an intent. I'm going to pass in this activity's context and going to say going to second activity class Java. Okay, another import. And what I want to do right now is first put in some extras because I want to pass in, for example, maybe some extra information when I move to the other activity. And to do that, I will first do intent.putExtra, and first give it a key, so I can use the key to sort of pull this information out in the second activity. So very creative name of key, and the value is Android. And after this, I can just start a new activity with this intent as the argument, and that would start the activity and open the second activity, giving it this information in the extras. And what I want to do if I want to get this extra in the second activity is in here, I would say, let's see, val, let's see, intent extra, and I could grab the intent, get its extras, and I would get a string, and the key is what I would use to grab the correct value, because you can put multiple extras in, and I can grab the value that was associated with the key. Question? Wait.
Oh, the question mark.
What?
The question mark? It's a null safety thing.
Oh, the question mark. Yeah.
Can you get rid of it? Let's see what Kotlin says. Yeah, so when you get rid of it, it gives you an error.
Okay, so yeah, sorry. Yeah, the question mark is because intent.extras can be null. The question mark notation is like one thing in Kotlin that says, okay, so if this thing is, null, don't do anything, just like keep the value as null. Otherwise, if this thing is not null, then call getString on it. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Yeah, this is a Kotlin specific thing. Good question. And then I can say yada yada.
The whole idea of this is to avoid null pointer exceptions. If I'm trying to get a string when there is no string to get, then I've run into a null pointer exception in the Java days. But in Kotlin, this is no longer an issue. You just put in the question mark, and it's a null safety feature.
Yep, and I'm just going to set the text view to intent extra here just to make sure that it actually got passed through. So let's see. I'm going to see if I can run this. Hopefully it can build successfully. High hopes for Android Studio. High hopes. If this thing crashes, I would be very sad. I cannot see anything. They're actually building. Okay, Gradle is apparently taking a vacation right now. So we are waiting for it to do its thing. Yeah, so as you can see, it's okay. I shouldn't say it's taking a vacation. It's working very hard. Question? Louder, please. Sorry. Oh, okay. So this thing, so Kotlin does type inference. As you can see, for like many variables, I don't have to unlike Java, I don't have to say like string blank equals blah. It most of the time can infer the type. In this case, because I'm not like saying colon text view after here, Kotlin wouldn't have enough information to infer the type without me putting this here. So this is why I'm adding text view here. The reason I didn't do this here was because like up here, I already said that this has type button. And so find view by ID already knows that this is a button. Question. And yeah, okay, so we are going to do the action. And we are going to go to the second activity. And as you can see, the value got passed along, and now its text is Android. So that's it for explicit intent. Any questions so far?
I was asking about the question of problem. Like, if the key refers to a null, then what will be the return value of this function?
Let's see. You mean if this here, if this thing is null,
Like if it points to something now, it does not point to anything, then what will be the return value of this?
oh, so if there is no key, I think it would probably be null, I think.
But then how does it protect the program from now pointing to exception?
Oh, you're saying if you get rid of the question mark? You're talking about if you get rid of the question mark?
No, I'm thinking like if the returning value is still now, well, then I don't see why it protects the programming from now pointing to exception.
Well, it won't return null because it won't build to begin with. Kotlin won't let you build the app because if you'll notice, the moment we got rid of the question mark, it immediately gives us a red line. Yeah, so now everything is red because it won't even let us build it because it sees that there's an error. So this is not a run, where it would have been a runtime error, this is now like a compile time error. It won't actually compile into a running application. Does that make sense?
Can the function return some value of now?
Yes, it can. If you see, the type inference for this is string question mark because the key might not actually have been put in there as the key for a value. So you can still get a null, like, as a final result.
Can you show me again where you did intent? The very first place that. Can you go to a really quick rundown of
Intents? All right, cool.
like how you implemented it?
So yeah, intent, first, let's see, intent, just create a new intent, give it the package context and give it basically the other class that you want to go to, and then put in the extra, and this part is optional, you don't have to put in an extra, and then start activity, and start activity actually basically does the action of going to the second intent.
So it's like
Second activity, yeah.
It's like you're saying create an intent, but then an intent to send something from where to where? From where I am now to the second activity. So I'm defining the source and the destination. Then I'm saying, let's actually put in data. So I could have multiple intent.put extras. Maybe I want to send Android, iOS, and Linux. So I could put in 3 different intent.put extras with like key 1, key 2, and key 3. And question for you, this sort of pulls back on data structure knowledge. Do the keys have to be unique? No. Why do you say that?
I didn't take data structure. I'm assuming that all the keys can get key reference or something everything fine.
So
They'll like hold on to in memory of.
it's not that deep. Imagine like a dictionary, right? Like a real life dictionary, Oxford, right? And so if I said like outlet meant like electrical plug, and then I also said it meant like flying horse, right? I've sort of got 2 conflicting things, right? So the idea is that that would be some key that goes to 2 different values, but you want it so that unique keys can have the values, the value that it goes to. So if otherwise, I could have sort of an ambiguous parent. Does this key go to this, or does this key go to that? Does that make sense? So that's why they have to be unique. So if I said Android, Linux, and iOS, then I have to have a unique key for each of those. So that way, on the receiving side, do you want to receive Android or do you want to receive iOS? If I had just said key, and key referred to all of them, then we'd have an issue, right? Because it points to 3 different things. Does that make sense? So that's this part, and then you have to actually start the intent. So to do this, you say start activity, and then from the intent, and this will launch the destination and give it that information that you'd sent. Does this make sense? Excellent question. I know this is one of the more confusing topics, so very good question.
All right, no questions? Good. All right, time to move on to implicit intent. So implicit intent, you don't really have to put anything in the constructor for intent. However, you have to give it an action. So I can say intent.action equals intent dot send, action send. So now this intent is going to want to, basically I'm creating intent to send something to some other app. And I can still put an extra, but basically some of the other apps have like already built-in keys where they're expecting any information to be mapped to. So if I want to, let's see, for example, send some text with my intent, the other apps that are able to receive action send, they're expecting any extra text I send them to be having the key intent.extra text. So that's just like a standardized way so that apps that can receive action send know like which key to look at to grab the text that I'm sending. So that's just for uniformity across apps. And then I can see intent.text type equals text/client. I think this will still work even without setting the type, but it's nice to just do it for clarity. And what about if you don't have an app on your phone that can receive this action send? Now, that would be a problem because then if you start the activity with the intent, it might not actually finish. It might try to look for an app that can receive this intent and not find one, and it'll be sad. So what you want to do is first check if there are any other apps that can actually receive this action send intent. And how you do that is you use this special intent. Question mark? Okay. Probably something. You know.
Is it intent?
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, it's some variation of send intent that is somewhere. Should have taken a screenshot of the code later. But yeah, basically it's something similar. You have to check something similar to send intent and see if it can resolve the activity first. And yeah, and only then can you actually send it. What else? Let's see. What time though? Go over?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, other thing is Snapbar. So let's see, Snapbar and all right, let's do Snapbar first. So I can first create a Snapbar using snackbar.make, and I can grab a view and just use button. And what you typically want to do is like grab the view of like the entire layout. So I would like add an ID to constraint layout and grab that, but I will use the button this time instead and make button.
If you want to come back to it.
Yeah, no, but still. No, but it's not the if statement though. It's the send intent now. Now make button, and I can give it some text. So I can say, see, Snapcore, and I can give it a length to be displayed. Long. And afterwards, I can call snackbar.show to actually display the snackbar, and I can also add an action to the Snapbar. So I can say Snapbar.setAction equals, and I can give the action a name. So this is like basically what happens when, if you see in Gmail questions, Snapbar. If you see in like Gmail, for example, you see like after you like delete something and it has like a little pop-up on the button, on the bottom, it might say like, okay, click on this button if you want to like undo that action that you just did, right? That's like a Snapbar. So yeah. And sometimes they don't show up with buttons, but other times you can like, they do show up with buttons, and you can set like the text on those buttons using this and what action those buttons take in here. And I can just say Snapbar.dismiss in here. And okay, location services is gonna take a long time. Okay, so one last thing on location services, since we're kind of running out of time. For location services, you'll need to go to your build.gradle and add in like an extra dependency. So if you see here, I've added an extra dependency like com.google.android.gms, yada, yada, yada. You can like find this online, but you'll need this if you want to access location services. And
It's also in the course textbook, so you can just directly pull it from the course textbook and paste it in.
yeah, and I want to end it for now, and I can basically just demo the rest of it. Keep going. All right.
If you need to leave, you can leave. But we're going to keep going, and you can come back to the recording later if you have to.
In put extra parentheses, what does if the intent extra text something like index or something?
Oh, okay. So this, recall earlier that when we passed a value to the other activity, we had a key over here, right? So this is a key.
But what if we want to send multiple values that we are using the same key?
I think for that, you can only like send in like one value mapped to this key, right? So I think if you wanted to send more, like extra information, you would have to like either concatenate everything in that one thing or like use other keys, if that makes sense.
Also, this is the difference between sending information within an app and sending it to a different app. So the call will be a little bit different.
All right. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. All right. There we go. Probably. This is probably going to work. But yeah, this is Implicit Intents, Snapbar, and I'm going to go do a brief demo of how to grab location from location services. So for that, we want to use this thing called use location provider client. And in your onClick listener, I am just going to comment these two out. And in case we want to demo that later. And so to get the location, first you want to create a location client. And to do that, you can say location, and do location services dot get fuse provider client this, and that will give you like a location client that you can grab the information from for location. After that, you will want to go to check whether you have permissions to access the location, and to do that, you have to use activity contact contact. But check if permission. And basically, we're going to ask, okay, does this app have the manifest.permission access find location.
Question. When we saw the example with TikTok, do they have an else or do they not have an else for this if condition?
I think they have a kind of like they will put another XML on it if anything like
Yeah, they do have an else because in the what is it called? In the case where it's not actually granted to them, then they're going to do something else, right? They're popping up that little pop-up message and asking them to grant permissions. This is sort of just an example.
And yeah, so after that, check if permission. Gosh darn it. Check self permission. There we go. I'm gonna improve my handwriting on my notes, unfortunately. And yeah, so basically, if the permission is granted, I can do one thing, and I can say location client dot last location dot add on success listener. And in here, they'll give us a location, which might be null, so you have to check it. But afterwards, you can do something with that location, like do a log.d of that location. Do you have your charger on you?
Yeah.
And otherwise, you can do something like request permission and ask for the manifest permission of access find location. And give it a request code, which is not really that important. Okay. Lots of errors in here. Okay. I do not even know where this error is. Okay, it's probably coming from here. I think that's it for the demo. Yeah, that's probably it for the demo. Let me know if you have questions. And if you stay for a bit longer, I should be able to fix this and actually get the app to run. But yeah, questions? Yes. Yeah. I just need to check my notes for the exact syntax of like this thing. Stuff on location is in the textbook.
Yeah. Most of it, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna look at the code for this. I think it might be permission granted. No? we go. Alright,
Oh,
that should be
oh,
working.
it works now.
Probably.
Here, wait, let's end.
Should I get the link to the attendance link?
Sure, one second.
And